Hello, friends. This is Kaz with Elevate Your Craft, and welcome to episode number 8 of the podcast. I'll be discussing a couple topics today that I've written about on the website. What I want to use this episode for is to delve a bit deeper into these topics and discuss a bit more background and kind of my experience in hopes of just providing a bit more insight into those topics that people can relate to if they're incorporating them in their routines currently. The first topic is the importance of the close push-up in a progressive routine, and the second is technique considerations. Okay, so keep in mind the supplemental articles are found on the website, www.elevateyourcraft.net. So the first, the importance of the close push-up in a progressive routine. The close push-up is a very important exercise that acts as a transition to more advanced exercises or push-up variations like the uneven push-up and unilateral variations like the one-arm push-up. For myself, it's the variation that I spent the most time on to date and with great results. It's also an exercise that I still and always will incorporate into my routines, just like the standard push-up. Because you can always find ways to make it more difficult, whether it's increasing volume, adding explosiveness, using a platform to elevate the feet, or bringing one foot off the ground during the repetitions. It's also a matter of drilling into the fundamentals, always keeping them polished and practiced. That way you keep and you maintain that foundation for the more advanced exercises. At the beginning, when I started working on the close push-up, I found I was mixing them with regular push-ups a lot, and that really helped me progress. What I'd often do is do 4 sets of standard push-ups, then on the last set, I would do close push-ups. And as I progressed, as I got stronger, I'd increase the number of sets of close push-ups. And that was a really good way to ease into the exercise and slowly transition to it and add it more and more into your routines. And it's likely that anyone in the midst of a progressive push-up routine will find it challenging. And that's because it incorporates an important change, which is shifting more weight onto the triceps. Now, before I get into the technical aspects of it, I just wanted to chat a bit more about difficulty. It's important to keep in mind that methods used to regress an exercise can generally be used at any point in an overall progression. So, for example, incorporating an incline is a good way to ease people into regular push-ups, but it can also work really well with a close push-up. So, you're just starting off, you're proficient at the standard push-up, and you want to start on the close. So what you can do is find something that you can lean on, whether it's a counter, a park bench, anything like that, where you can introduce an incline and start working on your close push-ups that way. And the really good thing about training toward the close push-up is that you can slowly inch your hands toward each other. It's not like you have to jump right in from the standard push-up to the close push-up. No, you can have a slow transition and build strength in small increments. That way you prepare yourself really well for when you can do a close push-up. What might also happen too is you'll find as you get better and better at a standard push-up, you'll bring your elbows in. And that's really good because what it does, it also shifts more weight onto the triceps, and it's often called a military push-up. Okay, so that's just a different variation. And then from there, it's really good to work into the close push-up by bringing your hands closer together. And you can also mix it up. For example, using incline when bringing your hands side by side, or no incline at all with your hands further apart. So it's really about how you want to approach it, how you want to customize your routine, and what you like to do. And doing this is a good way to keep things fresh and reinforce that feeling of progression in your workouts. We feel best when we're making progress. And from a psychological standpoint, doing these types of things can really reinforce what you're doing and help make it more fulfilling and more fun. Another way or thing to consider with the incline is that it's an awesome way to warm up. So if you're starting to get better at close push-ups, you can use an incline to warm up and then just do your standard close push-ups. So getting into the technical side of it, a close push-up really is any hand positioning in which the hands are closer than shoulder width apart. And it's when this happens that more weight is placed on the triceps, making the exercise more difficult. So what I mentioned before is the great thing is you can gradually work your hands inward in order to progress. So you don't have to make that jump, which can make the whole experience less daunting. And the importance of this exercise lies in that slow shift, bringing more and more weight onto the triceps. And that, again, is very important because as you move on to more advanced exercises like uneven push-ups, like lever push-ups or unilateral variations, it's crucial to have that base strength in the triceps because those exercises really, really rely on it. So, but you can do really well by stopping at the close push-up as well. I mean, if you have no interest in doing more advanced variations, I remember watching a video on YouTube made by a guy named Hannibal for King, and he's pretty well known in the calisthenics community. And I remember him saying that all he does are close push-ups, with slight variations, of course, to make them a bit harder, like the ones I mentioned before, lifting the leg off the ground during the exercise. But he is an absolute beast. So, he sticks to those, and he does very well. So if you have no interest in pursuing anything more advanced than the close push-up, you can still do very, very well. Above, I mentioned using an incline variation to regress the close push-up. But there are a few more worth mentioning, especially for people who are slowly transitioning to it, or for beginners or anything like that. The lever can be shortened, so you can rest on the knees instead of the feet during the exercise. You can also reduce the range of motion. I myself am not a huge fan of decreasing the range of motion no matter what I do, what exercise I do. I prefer maximizing it and then regressing in other ways because it's all about stimulating the muscles at all points in the range of motion. But, this is personal preference, and if you find that works, fantastic. That's just something that I prefer to do, but that is a way to regress an exercise. So, for example, I'd rather be able to complete a full set of close push-ups with my hands at a wider position than bring my hands side to side and only be able to perform limited range reps. And as a final note on the first topic, regarding hand placement, it's all personal preference. I mean, I've always done the diamond shape, which is formed by the index finger and the thumb during the exercise. And that's also why sometimes you'll hear the exercise referred to as diamond push-ups. But, I mean, if you prefer to bring your thumbs in, that's fine as well. It's really just what's comfortable for you and, whatever works. The second topic is technique considerations. And technical considerations are very important because they help approach what is to be considered the ideal way to execute the movement. It maximizes muscle contraction and allows us to perform the exercise in a safe and effective way. Oftentimes injuries occur when proper technique is not maintained, and it's also a good indicator that an exercise is too difficult at the moment. Even the idea of ideal technique will make an exercise more difficult. So it's a really good idea to regress an exercise if you can't really perform it in order to build the necessary strength for progression. That being said, when you do begin to perform more difficult variations, it's unlikely that your technique will be perfect, which is okay because striving for ideal technique is a progression in itself. Really, it's just being or assuring yourself that you're always approaching the exercise in a safe way to avoid injury. And, your technique is not too sloppy or you're really you cannot do the exercise at all. Always be willing to regress and then approach the exercise that way. Because building that ideal technique, again, is a progression in itself. So keep that in mind and always just make sure that you're doing it safely and you're always keeping the achievement of that ideal technique in mind. And what I found with calisthenics, and this is just my personal experience, is that it's pretty difficult to injure yourself within calisthenics. The possibility is certainly still there if you're careless. But when I found when I was training with weights, and I think this is more a psychological thing because there's certainly technique with weights, but it was more about pushing myself. And this is particular with the deadlift too. I found I was always trying to push myself and achieve those heavier weights. And I think at some points I did sacrifice technique, which unfortunately I didn't really injure myself in a major way or anything like that. But I think that psychological approach to it where you're constantly trying to push yourself can come to bite you. But within calisthenics, if you can't do something, you just can't. You know, if you're trying to do a one-arm push-up, for example, and you're not even close to achieving a close push-up using both hands, you just can't do it. So I've found that it is difficult to injure yourself. But again, that is if you maintain focus and you're not just careless to begin with. So that's one benefit I've found with it, that I haven't really injured myself other than some joint pain or tendinitis in the elbow, which is common among calisthenics practitioners, but nothing major, which is pretty fortunate. So some of the considerations regarding technique are as follows. The first is tense the body and contract the core. What it does is it stabilizes you. It allows for greater muscle recruitment and power during the exercise. You know, we draw our power from our core, and keeping it engaged and stabilized will help the exercise overall. The second is maintain focus and spatial awareness. And this refers to the idea of being in the moment and in the workout, focused on how you're executing the movements. Distractions can suck the life out of a workout, whether it's your cell phone, texting, adjusting music, staring off, and just kind of zoning out. And it's also about being aware of your surroundings and where your body is going, you know, and this kind of talks about too that idea of just losing focus and being careless, and injuries can occur that way. And from the focus standpoint, it's really getting the most out of your workout, being there and being in the moment. And part of that comes from really enjoying what you're doing, you know, approaching your training in a fun way, something that you like to do. That way you can get the most out of it and not just zone out and really lose that motivation or drive. The third is keep the back straight. And this, of course, is where applicable. You know, if you're doing a back bridge, that doesn't apply. And scapula retracted, or your shoulder blades retracted. This really complements keeping the core contracted and helps promote proper posture. Keeping the scapula retracted no matter where you are, I mean, in everyday life, when you're sitting down, walking around, it may be awkward at first, but if you really developed a good habit of doing that, it'll help correct your posture. You kind of see a lot in some people where their shoulders are out, you know, they're forward, and that comes a lot from the way we sit now and sitting at computers or sitting in cars and not developing those good habits of keeping the scapula retracted, even during exercise too, which helps promote maximal muscle contraction, which will benefit you even more. But those two things are pretty important, because once you find that you're doing it more and more often, standing like that or maintaining that posture becomes much easier. The fourth is understanding limb placement and function. And it's very important to understand these things because it can really help or hinder the exercise. It really forces you to know what you're doing and how you're executing an exercise based on your goals. Again, going back to the push-up, If you don't understand how your limb placement affects the exercise, you could be making it a lot more difficult for where you're at. Or at the same time, you could be making it a lot easier than you'd like in order to progress. So you really want to know where you're putting your limbs in order to maximize that ideal technique and where they're going too, and what are the function of the limbs for this exercise. In a more general level, it just really forces you to understand what you're doing, and it just helps you achieve your goals because you'll know how to get there in the most effective way. The fifth concept is controlling the neck, and this is, of course, important for the C-spine, the cervical spine, to prevent injury and just general strain or discomfort during exercises. And it helps encourage proper alignment during exercise, which will overall just make the exercise more comfortable and just not easier to execute, but just maintaining that alignment and comfort during the exercise. The next is regarding speed. So generally, speeding a technique up will make the exercise easier due to momentum, while slowing it down will demand greater endurance and so increase difficulty. So if you do push-ups really quickly, you'll likely make it a bit easier. However, whether you're benefiting from that or maintaining your form, because it does become a bit harder to maintain form if you're doing an exercise really quickly. So keep that in mind, and slowing it down is always a good way to make an exercise more challenging. So going back to the close push-up, if you're really good at them and you like doing them, that's just a way to make it that much more difficult and progress using the close push-up. The final consideration is always be willing to regress in exercise to build greater strength. And this is something that, in the podcast so far that I've done, I've really emphasized because it's very, very important. And it comes down to really having patience and not doing the exercises expecting an end. It forces you to really look at your routines and your overall goals as just kind of a point in the journey. Because if you think, at some point I will be strong enough to do that exercise, but right now I really need to regress in order to achieve that in the best way that I can. So I think from a psychological standpoint, it forces you to recognize that, okay, this is a journey. I'm not going to stop exercising anytime soon. This is a commitment that I really want to progress, so I'll get there. But right now, I just want to make sure that I get the best technique that I can, that I approach the exercise in the safest way that I can. So I'm going to regress right now, and eventually I will be able to progress and achieve my goals. So those are some of the considerations regarding technique, and again, they're more general. There is, of course, technique for each exercise out there, but on a broader level, I really wanted to just let people know about these considerations because they still are very important. So that covers the two topics from the website, and this is something that I will do more often. As I add articles to the website, I think it's a great idea to also discuss them on the podcast, to not only answer questions that people may have, but to offer some more personal experience that I have, and maybe just a bit more insight that you didn't get from the written article. If you like the podcast, you can follow it on Twitter at EYC Kaz, EYCKAS, the same handle on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel as well. It's Elevate Your Craft, all one word. And there's also the Facebook page, which is Elevate Your Craft, all one word. And the website is www.elevateyourcraft.net. And that's it for me. Thanks, guys, very much, and I'll be talking to you again soon.